I'm Asha Robles, and this is SPE Talks Tech, Managed Pressure Drilling. Welcome to the SPE Podcast. If you haven't subscribed yet, we encourage you to do so. It's a great way to keep up with the latest oil and gas technical trends and valuable information. We're trying something a little new. For this episode, we'll be handing off the interviewing portion to Steve Nas, Regional Wells Manager, Asia Pacific for WellSpec. Steve will be speaking with Mark Arathoon of PETRONAS and Martin Culen, Chief Commercial Officer for Kelda Drilling Controls. At the time of this recording in January 2020, the three had just wrapped up SPE's two-day workshop on managed pressure drilling, collaboration towards excellent applications and solutions, which took place in Malaysia. Mark served as a co-chair while both Martin and Steve were committee members. So with that background and introduction, here's Steve Nas, coming to us from Kuala Lumpur.
Hello everybody, we've just wrapped up the SPE Managed Pressure Drilling Workshop here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, talking to Mark and Martin about the results of this workshop and the advancements in managed pressure drilling technology we've seen, especially with regards to the drilling contractors. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, speaking from an operator's perspective here in Malaysia, I think it's fantastic, first off, to see the advancements that have been presented. I'm really excited. I've been really impressed by all the drilling contractors that have been present at this workshop. And if you compare and look back 2 years ago to our last workshop, 2017, 2 and a bit years ago, really we've come on a huge amount. So they've really taken up the challenge and really run with it. And they're obviously very excited about it as well. So I'm very excited to see the developments.
Yeah, I think historically, when this was first put on the table, that contractors, particularly ones in deep water, should start to take more ownership of this drilling process. The comfort level, you could see it was palpable. They were not comfortable with this at all because it was entirely something new. It was going to be a paradigm shift. But fast forward 3+ years to today, and they are much more comfortable doing that. Even considering talking about things about handling influxes with the primary barrier envelope and things like that. Whereas before we never even would have touched on that.
Yeah, and they've also made huge investments financially to buy the capital equipment and to install it on their rigs. So really, it's amazing.
That was a good commentary on the drilling contractors. Let's talk a little bit about the new technology developments in managed pressure drilling that we've seen and talked about over the past 2 days.
I think from Kelda's point of view, from a service company's point of view, what I see is, in addition to hardware developments, it's coming down to the controls and which is then leaking into the discussion about automation. So what we're actually seeing is that as we need to have the driller more in control of the process, he needs complicated systems that are presented very simply to him as a control, so that he is able to not only move pipe up and down and be in control of mechanical movement of drilling equipment, but also pressure control. And so it's the advancements in the control system side of things that I see, advancements in what we're seeing now, and we spent a lot of time talking about that today, is that you'll see even earlier, 3-4 years ago, the majority of actuators that were being used for choke actuation were hydraulic in nature. And so now we're seeing almost everyone in the room is talking about electrical actuation. And it's the use of electrical actuators, not only in deep water, but also on shore, that is facilitating the use of more advanced control algorithms. And then that's enabling the driller to take more control more easily.
And from an operator's perspective, again, all we're interested in is having, if we're targeting constant bottom hole pressure, that's what we want to see.
Precisely.
And we want to see it justified, and we want to see the models work. We want to see the technology works. So if something doesn't work, then again we have to find something new. So yeah, we're looking for accuracy and control, but also simplicity, as you said. We don't want to overload the driller.
Absolutely.
As a well engineer and an MPD engineer, and with the experience in high pressure, high temperature managed pressure drilling wells, I was very much taken by the discussion about influx management, well control, influx management envelope today. And I thought that was an excellent discussion on, how do we make that simpler? How do we make sure the rig crews understand it? How do we make sure the drillers and the drill crew understand what are the limits? What influxes can we detect? What influxes can we take? How do we deal with the influxes and what's required? Thoughts on that?
It's interesting how the conversation has turned, because previously it would have been very difficult to talk about circulating influxes that were going to be larger than 5 barrels. And now the acceptance of the calculation methodology that's represented in the influx management envelope, or however it wishes to be presented, is becoming, again, the acceptance is increasing. And so more and more people are recognizing that. And the big takeaway that I got from this workshop in particular is that despite the fact that the calculations, the physics behind it are relatively simple, the movement from a traditional MPD operations matrix to now something which is graphical in nature, people in the workshop were saying it's still too complicated. It's too complicated for a driller to comprehend, etc. And so my takeaway from this was, as everybody said, the calculations are very valid and need to be done, but it should be differentiated from an engineering and a planning tool to what actually goes out on the rig in front of the driller. So the driller, not unlike what we were talking about previously, still needs something very simple. He can't be inferring something or trying to plot something on a graph. He needs either an indicator, is this good or is it bad?
I agree completely on that. I think it's a fantastic concept, which I think, Martin, you pioneered this whole concept. I think it's a fantastic idea, but at the moment, I don't think everyone's of a full enough understanding and appreciation of it. I think the subtleties aren't really understood fully. So I think it almost needs to be boiled down back to the operation style matrix. You can have the IME calculations behind, buried somewhere in a computer, but as long as all it tells you, as you said, is either go or stop. That's kind correct. Of a decision. Because you don't want the driller to be trying to make a difficult decision with all the other pressure that he's got when you've taken an influx.
You're listening to the SPE Podcast. We'll return to Steve, Mark, and Martin in just a moment. First, we wanted to remind you about SPE's online education resource. Whether you prefer live or on-demand training, join our industry experts as they explore solutions to real problems and discuss trending topics. Take yourself to greater depths right from your desktop with SPE Online Education. Learn more at webevents.spe.org. Now, let's rejoin the discussion and send it back to Kuala Lumpur.
There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of comments from the contractors, the drilling contractors, the service providers, and some of the operators on automation. How do we make it more automated? How do we make sure that crews understand what the systems are doing? We've seen some well control issues around managed pressure drilling where the computer does something and we're not quite understanding what is the computer doing or why is it doing what it's doing. Thoughts on that?
I think we've seen before with automation. Let's backtrack a little bit where we're relying on surface back pressure quite often, and if you're using a hydrostatically underbalanced mud, then the risk is that at any stage, if something goes wrong, you can take an influx. Mm-hmm. But we also know if you drill on a pressure ramp and you get you've drilled deeper down the pressure ramp and not realised it, and you're not taking the right precautions, then there is still a possibility of taking an influx. And no matter what automation you've got, that can still happen. Mm-hmm. It's a question of whether it responds and whether it responds correctly. I think there's definitely a great benefit from trying to automate the response, because we've seen in the past slip-ups between different parts of the rig team, either the MPD team or else the drilling contractor team or the mud logging team on the rig, and between them, they're kind of pointing fingers at each other, and no one's actually managing the bottom oil pressure and stopping the influx.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing in some of these more complicated wells, just as you talked about, Mark, is even the visualization is aiding a lot. There's a real-time hydraulics model in some of these rigs that is effectively painting what the annular pressure profile is, and then even overlaying what the last step-down test was and what the last formation integrity test was. So you're looking at what boundaries that you have. So that is starting to at least guide people going that way. And I think some of the advancements that we're going to be seeing in those hydraulic models that can now start to act as a digital twin of the well, and then with some even reservoir inputs, if you do cross either the fracture gradient or if you're now moving more towards the pore pressure line, because it's modeled in this digital twin, it is now the control system is going to be able to offer some sort of an automated response a little bit better. Of course, with the proper validation prior, not just letting it run on its own before being done operationally on the rig.
Good, and that brings us to, of course, a topic that's close to my heart with training, having done a lot of instruction. So training and competency with the advances in managed pressure drilling, the advances in managed pressure drilling equipment, the advances in managed pressure drilling software. The training and competency part was discussed at length, not only for managed pressure drilling, but well control training as well. And I think definitely that there's further advances required in that. From an operator perspective, what's your thoughts on
that? Training is a very close subject for my heart as well. And it's the training's got to be appropriate, specific. I'll tell you what I was very pleased about from this workshop was. Several of the drilling contractors were talking about the training that they were doing, and they were saying they were following the specific procedures that they worked on in great detail. And I think that's essential. The other important step that they've done, as Martin alluded to, is that they're using simulators now to simulate the well and simulate the downhole response, which is another area that I'm still concerned about, and that is we can transfer equipment to the ownership of the drilling contractor, and the drilling contractor has all the skills and capability to manage that equipment. That's what they do for a profession, whether it's electrical, hydraulic, mechanical, whatever. But they may not have the specific MPD downhole pressure management experience. So that's the side I'd be interested in seeing how that training is going to develop in future. Martin, you've done a lot of training. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess all three of us can say the same of the fact that training and competency is near and dear to our heart. I have been involved with training and specifically MPD training for a number of years. And what I see as some of the gaps, and was brought up in this workshop, is a third party, perhaps accreditation, something to address the minimum training curriculum so that we can level the playing field when it comes to everything. That's the first gap. And so I know there has been some work that's been done by the IADC to develop a training curriculum in order to address this gap so that this program can be formally rolled out, and then either training institutions or drilling companies alike can adopt that and have it vetted by a third party. But the other gap that I think we started to speak about it a little bit, in particular with things we were talking about already, the fact that we can use managed pressure drilling equipment to handle influxes of an appropriate size. We're now starting to bridge the gap between conventional, or rather operations, and well control operations. So Steve, as you mentioned, we spent some time talking about, is anyone engaging the well control community on this? What does this really mean? What competency do people need to have when they're circulating those things out? So that second gap, I think, also needs to be addressed, and will be addressed by this new curriculum that's coming out. We have to make sure that despite the level of automation that's there, the specialists that are on site, the people that have that are in an advisory role, they know what needs to happen with that influx, whether it's acceptable or not.
Yeah, and I think that's a good part to end this on. And I think the well control people, the well control teams that are out there in the industry need to start linking up with managed pressure drilling. I mean, we're after all managing the pressure while we're drilling. So I think the training, well control, the competency is going to be an important step forward as we move equipment from deeper and deeper waters and higher pressures. Thank you both very much for participating in this podcast, and sincere thanks to participating and making this workshop a success.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. And thanks, Martin.
And thank you.
You're listening to the SPE Podcast. That was longtime SPE member Steve Nas hosting a discussion with Mark Arathoon and Martin Culen, addressing the technology advancements in managed pressure drilling. Let us know what you thought of this format. Email us podcast@spe.org. Also use the hashtag SPE Podcast to keep the conversation going on social. Looking for the latest episodes? Search the SPE Podcast on Apple or anywhere else you listen to your podcasts. Please leave reviews. We appreciate the 5 stars and hearing your feedback. You can find us online at spe.org/podcast. Special thanks to this episode's participants, Steve Nas, Mark Arathoon, and Mark Culen. I'm Asha Robles, and thanks for listening.
SPE Podcast is powered by the Society of Petroleum Engineers, whose vision is to advance the oil and gas community's ability to meet the world's energy demands in a safe, environmentally responsible, and sustainable manner. Learn more at spe.org.